From the Cruelest Journey, 600 Miles to Timbuktu. Travel writing by Kira Salek. As you read, what does Salek think and feel about her journey? Make note of her thoughts, comments, and any telling details you notice. Write down any questions you generate during reading. From Chapter 1. In the beginning, my journeys feel at best ludicrous, at worst insane. This one is no exception. The idea is to paddle nearly 600 miles on the Niger River in a kayak, alone, from the Malian town of Old Sagoo to Timbuktu. And now at the very hour when I have decided to leave, a thunderstorm bursts open the skies, sending down apocalyptic rain, washing away the very ground beneath my feet. It is the rainy season in Mali, for which there can be no comparison in the world. Lightning pierces trees, slices across houses. Thunder racks the skies and pounds the earth like mortar fire, and every living thing huddles in tenuous shelter, expecting the world to end. Which it doesn't, at least not this time. So that we all give a collective sigh to the salvation of the passing storm as it rumbles its way east and I survey the river. I'm to leave on this morning. Rain or no rain, today is the day for the journey to begin. And no one, not even the oldest in the village, can say for certain whether I'll get to the end. Let's do it, I say, leaving the shelter of an adobe hut. My guide from town, Madobu, points to the north to further storms. He says he will pray for me. It's the best he can do. To his knowledge, no man has ever completed such a trip, though a few have tried, and certainly no woman has done such a thing. This morning he took me aside and told me he thinks I'm crazy, which I understood his concern and thanked him. He told me that the people of Old Sagoo think I'm crazy too, and that one uncanny good luck will keep me safe. Still, when a person tells me I can't do something, I'll want to do it all the more. It may be a failing of mine. I carry my inflatable kayak through the narrow passageways of Old Sagoo, past the small adobe huts melting in the rains, past the huddling goats and smoke of cooking fires, people peering out at me from the dark entranceways. It is a labyrinth of ancient homes, built and rebuilt after each storm, plastered with the very earth people walk upon. Old Sagoo must look much the same as it did in Scottish explorer Mungo Park's time, when exactly 206 years ago to the day, he left on the first of his 2 river journeys down the Niger to Timbuktu, the first such attempt by a Westerner. It is no coincidence that I planned to leave on the same day and from the same spot. Park is my benefactor of sorts, my guarantee. If he could travel down the Niger, then so can I. And it is all the guarantee I have for this trip, that an obsessed 19th century adventurer did what I would like to do. Of course, Park also died on this river, but I've so far managed to overlook that. I gaze at the Niger through the adobe passageways, staring at waters that began in the mountainous rainforests of Guinea and traveled all this way to central Mali, waters that will journey northeast with me to Timbuktu before cutting a great circular swath through the Sahara and retreating south, through Niger, on to Nigeria, passing circuitously through mangrove swamps and jungle, resting at last in the Atlantic in the Bight of Benin. But the Niger is more than a river. It is a kind of faith. Bent and plied by Saharan sands, it preserves more than 2,600 miles from beginning to end through one of the hottest, most desolate regions of the world. And when the rains come each year, it finds new strength of purpose, surging through the sun-baked lands, giving people the boons of crops and livestock and fish, taking nothing, asking nothing. It humbles all who sees it. If I were to try to explain why I'm here, why I chose Mali and the Niger for this journey, now that is a different matter. I can already feel the resistance in my gut, the familiar clutch of fear. I used to avoid stripping myself down in search of motivation, scared of what I might uncover, scared of anything that might suggest a taint of the pathological. And would it be enough to say that I admire Park's own trip on the river and want to try a similar challenge? That answer carries a whiff of the disingenuous. It sounds too easy to me. Human motivation itself is a complicated thing. If only it was simple enough to say, here's the Niger, and I want to paddle it. But I'm not that kind of traveler, and this isn't that kind of trip. If a journey doesn't have something to teach you about yourself, then what kind of journey is it? There is one thing I'm already certain of. Though we may think we choose our journeys, they choose us. Hobbled donkeys cower under a new onslaught of rain. Ears back, necks craned. And this isn't that kind of trip. If a journey doesn't have something to teach you about yourself, then what kind of journey is it? There is one thing I'm already certain of. Though we may think we choose our journeys, they choose us. Hobbled donkeys cower under a new onslaught of rain, ears back, necks craned. Little children dare each other to touch me, and I make it easy for them, stopping and holding out my arm. They stroke my white skin as if it were velvet, using only the pads of their fingers, then stare at their hands to check for wet paint. Thunder again. More rain falls. I stop on the shore near a centuries-old kapok tree, under which I imagine Park once took shade. I open my bag, spread out my little red kayak, and start to pump it up. I'm doing this trip under the sponsorship of National Geographic Adventure, which hopes to run a magazine story about it. This means that they need photos, lots of photos. And so a French photographer named Remy Benali feverishly snaps pictures of me. I don't know what I hate more, river storms or photo shoots. I value the privacy and integrity of my trips, and I don't want my journey turning into a circus. The magazine presented the best compromise it could. Remy, renting a motor-driven pirogue, was given instructions to find me on the river every few days to do his thing. My kayak is nearly inflated. A couple of women nearby, with colorful cloth wraps called pagnies, tied tightly about their breasts, gaze at me cryptically as if to ask, "Who are you and what do you think you're doing?" The Niger churns and slaps the shore, in a surly mood. I don't pretend to know what I'm doing. Just one thing at a time now, kayak inflated, kayak loaded with my gear. Paddles fitted together and ready. Madobu is standing on the shore watching me. "I'll pray for you," he reminds me. I balance my gear, adjust the straps, get in, and, finally, irrevocably, I paddle away. The storm erupts into a new overture. Torrential rains, waves higher than my kayak, trying to capsize me. But my boat is self-bailing and I stay afloat. The wind drives the current in reverse, tearing and ripping at the shores, sending spray into my face. I paddle madly, crashing and driving forward. I travel inch by inch, or so it seems, arm muscles smarting and rebelling against this journey. I crawl past New Sugu, fighting the Niger for more distance. Large river steamers rest in jumbled rows before cement docks, the town itself looking dark and deserted in the downpour. No one is out in their boats. The people know something I don't, that the river dictates all travel. A popping feeling now and a screech of pain. My right arm lurches from a ripped muscle. But this is no time and place for such an injury, and I won't tolerate it, stuck as I am in a storm. I try to get used to the pulses of pain as I fight the river. There is only one direction to go, forward. Stopping has become anathema. I wonder what we look for when we embark on these kinds of trips. There's the pat answer that you tell the people you don't know, that you're interested in seeing a place, learning about its people. But then the trip begins, and the hardship comes, and the hardship is more honest. It tells us that we don't have enough patience yet, nor humility, nor gratitude. And we thought that we did. Hardship brings us closer to truth, and thus is more difficult to bear. But from it alone comes compassion. And so I've told the world that it can do what it wants with me during this trip, if only by the end I've learned something more. A bargain then, the journey, my teacher. And where is the river of just this morning with its white caps that would have liked to drown me, with its current flowing backward against the wind? Gone to this, a river of smoothest glass, a placidity unbroken by wave or eddy, with islands of lush greenery awaiting me like distant Xanadu's. The Niger is like a mercurial god, meting out punishment and benediction on a whim. And perhaps the god of the river sleeps now, returning matters to the mortals who ply its waters, the Bozo and Simono fishermen in their pointy canoes, the long passenger pirogues overloaded with people and merchandise rumbling past, leaving diesel fumes in their wake. And now, inexplicably, the white woman in a little red boat, paddling through waters that flawlessly mirror the cumulus clouds above. We all belong here in our way. It is as if I'd entered a very lucid dream, continually surprised to find myself here on this river. I've become a hapless actor in a mysterious play, not yet knowing what my part is, left to gape at the wonder of what I have set in motion. Somehow, I'm in a kayak on the Niger River, paddling very slowly but very surely to Timbuktu. As Salik continues on her journey, she encounters raging storms, dangerous hippos, and unrelenting heat. Because she is traveling in a small kayak and unable to carry many supplies, she comes ashore each night, seeking shelter and food from the locals who live along the banks of the river. The locals are very curious about a woman undertaking such a dangerous journey alone. Some of them greet her warmly and generously, others with hostility. Finally, weak from dysentery, she approaches her final destination, Timbuktu. From chapter 13. This river will never end, I say out loud over and over again like a mantra. My map shows an obvious change to the northeast, but that turn hasn't come for hours, may never come at all. To be so close to Timbuktu and yet so immeasurably far away. All I know is that I must keep paddling. I have to be close. Determined still to get to Timbuktu's port of Kuriomi by nightfall, I shed the protection of my long-sleeved shirt, pull the kayak's thigh strap in tight, and prepare for the hardest bout of paddling yet. I paddle like a person possessed. I paddle the hours away, the sun falling aside to the west, but still keeping its heat on me. I keep up a cadence in my head, keeping my breaths regular and deep, in sync with my arm movements. The shore passes by slowly, but it passes. As the sun gets ominously low, burning a flaming orange, the river turns almost due north and I can see a distant, square-shaped building made of cement, the harbinger of what can only be Kuriomi. Hardly a tower of gold, hardly an El Dorado, but I'll take it. I paddle straight toward it, ignoring the pains in my body, my raging headache. Timbuktu, Timbuktu! Bozo fishermen fly the river out here and they stare at me as I pass. They don't ask for money or cadeau. Can they see the determination in my face? Sense my fatigue? All they say is, "Ça va, madame?" with obvious concern. One man actually stands and raises his hands in a cheer, urging me on. I take his kindness with me into the final stretch, rounding the river's sharp curve to the port of Kuriomi. I see Remy's boat ahead. He waits for me by the port, telephoto lens in hand. It's the first time during this trip that I'm not fazed by being photographed. I barely notice him. I barely notice anything except the port ahead of me. All I can think about is stopping. Here is the ending I've promised myself for weeks. Here I am, 600 miles of river covered with the port of Timbuktu straight ahead. Something tugs at my kayak. I'm yanked back. Fishnets caught in my rudder. To be this close, within sight of my goal and thwarted by yet one more thing? The universe surely has a sense of humor. I jump into the water, fumbling at the nylon netting tangled around the screws holding the rudder to the inflatable rubber. It's shallow here, and my bare feet sink into river mud full of sharp pieces of rock that cut instantly into my soles. I try to ignore the pain, working fast, pulling the netting off until I free my kayak. When I get inside, the blood from my feet mixes with gray river water like a final offering to the Niger. I maneuver around the nets, adjust my course for the dock of Kuriomi, and paddle hard. Just as the last rays of the sun color the Niger, I pull up beside a great white river steamer named appropriately the Tombouctou. Remy's boat is directly behind me, the flash from his camera lighting up the throng of people gathering on shore. There is no more paddling to be done. I've made it. I can stop now. I stare up at the familiar crowd waiting in the darkness. West African pop music blares from a party on the Tombouctou. Slowly, I undo my thigh straps and get out of my kayak, hauling it from the river and dropping it on shore for the last time. A huge crowd is gathered around me, children squeezing in to stroke my kayak. People ask where I've come from and I tell them Old Ségou. They can't seem to believe it. Ségou? One man asks. He points down the Niger River, his hand waves and curves as he follows the course of the river in his mind. Oui, I say. Eh? He exclaims. Ségou, Ségou, Ségou? A woman asks. I nod. She runs off to tell other people, and I can see passerby rushing over to take a look at me. What does a person look like who has come all the way from Ségou? They stare down at me in my sweat-stained tank top, my clay-smeared skirt, my sandals both held together with plastic ties. I unload my things to the clamor of their questions, but even speaking seems to pain me now. Such a long time getting here, and was the journey worth it? Or is it blasphemy to ask that now? I can barely walk, have a high fever, I haven't eaten anything for more than a day. How do you know if the journey is worth it? I would give a great deal right now for silence, for stillness. My exhaustion and sickness begin to alter this arrival, numbing the sense of finish and self-congratulation and replacing it with only the most important of questions. I found that illness does this to me. Quiets the busy thoughts of the mind, gives me a rare clarity that I don't usually have. I see the weeks on the river, the changing tribal groups, the lush shores down by Old Ségou, metamorphosing slowly into the treeless, sandy spread near Timbuktu. I'm wishing I could explain it to people, the subtle yet certain way the world has altered over these past few weeks. The inevitability of it, the grace of it. Grace because in my life back home, every day had appeared the same as the one before. Nothing seemed to change. Nothing took on new variety. It had felt like a stagnant life. I know now with the utter conviction of my heart that I want to avoid that stagnant life. I want the world to always be offering me the new grace, the grace of the unfamiliar, which means, and I pause with the thought, a path that will only lead through my fears, where there are certainty and guarantees I will never be able to meet that unknown world. Night settles on the shore and Remy pulls his boat up alongside the cement dock. I deflate my kayak for the last time and pack it up, carrying it and my things onto the boat. Heather and Remy both give me a hug of congratulation, but I'm still too numb to really comprehend that I've done it yet. To celebrate, Remy offers me my choice of their onboard selection of soft drinks. I take an orange Fanta. Outside, barely discernible in the darkness, the crowd of onlookers continues to discuss what I've done. I can hear them exchanging the word Segu, and I wonder if they believe that I've paddled this far. But it doesn't matter. I lie down on one of the benches. My head feels hot, and it aches to the metronome-like beating of my heart. Remy has gone on shore and tries valiantly to get us a taxi into Timbuktu, but the driver of the only car available at this late hour demands an exorbitant sum of more than $150 to drive 30 kilometers. It is the first time I've seen Remy get so blustering and assertive, and he argues passionately for a lower sum. We are all hoping for what we've been promised ourselves tonight, a hotel room in Timbuktu with blessed air conditioning. But the driver won't budge his price, thinking he has us, and we're all nearly out of our magazine expense money. I suggest as we camp and go to Timbuktu the next morning, when there are sure to be plenty of taxis to take us there at a reasonable price. For the first time, I see this disappointment as just another uncontrollable part of life, like the storms that arose on the Niger. Nothing personal. I point to the opposite shore as a place to camp away from the crowds. Remy and Heather agree, and so the great boat is started up and we speed over the Niger beneath a sky dazed with stars. We ground the boat on the opposite shore, and I go about setting up my tent. I'm too sick to fully acknowledge the end of my trip. Remy offers me a drink to celebrate, but I know I wouldn't be able to keep it down. I do manage to swallow some antibiotics and anti-nausea pills, which quiet my stomach and enough to allow me to eat a mango and some of the noodles Remy's cook has made for us. As I sit to eat, I'm swaying back and forth in my mind, as if I were still careering over the waves of the Niger. I've heard that this happens to sailors, that they get so attached to being tossed by the waves that they have trouble readjusting to solid ground. For me, it is as if the Niger still keeps a part of me, as if to tell me that I finally belong to it.